Thank you, Yvonne. Do we have a top cover sheet for this? Yeah, this is budget workshop packet, but top agenda sheet. Time is 6 p.m. The city of Balcones Heights is going to be conducting the budget workshop number 1 for the fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget. Hey. Notice is hereby given that the above call meeting of the governing body of the city of Balcones Heights, Texas, will be held on Monday, July 7, 2025 at 6 p.m. in the Justice Center, located at 3300 Hillcrest Drive, Balcones Heights, Texas, 78201, to consider and act upon any lawful subject which may come before said meetings, including, among others, the following items to be discussed and acted upon. I'm going to call the order and recording of quorum. We have Council Member Ms. Weaver, Mr. Ebersol, Mr. Hernandez, and Mr. Burton present. Mr. Councilman Sellers is not present, so we have 4 present. 4 present and 1 missing, Mr. Sellers. We're going to do the invocation and the pledges of allegiance to the Texas flag and the U.S. flag. So let's go ahead and do the invocation. I'll go ahead and lead on that today. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Father, we gather today to think about those poor children that, recognizing that they suffered and the loss that occurred in Kerrville, Texas, and all of that Guadalupe area and Coal Mound. We're there in spirit, Father, with the families and the children who lost their lives and the adults as well. Such a tragic event, but we recognize that these events are man-made, earthly made, and we pray for the best of the family and anything that can be done to give them and alleviate their pain. We also pray for the city, Lord, that we may lead in a direction that empowers us to provide services to our community, to give us the liberty of utilizing the core delivery services that we have in this community for the betterment of moving forward our community. Amen. So who would like to do the Pledge of Allegiance? Yeah. There you go. Go ahead. Pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, to the republic for peace, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Pledge allegiance to the one day for God, indivisible. Thank you. At this time, citizens who have filled out a registration form prior to the start of the meeting may speak on any topic. Anybody, so long as that topic. During the citizens to be heard section, no council action may take place and no active council discussion or response is required to the speaker. Citizens who wish to speak on a specific agenda item, the item is called for discussion must first fill out a registration form prior to the start of the meeting, indicating which agenda item you wish to address, and we will follow the same protocol we did in the last meeting. 3 minutes combined for both subjects. Citizens to be heard, hand items on the agenda all at once for a 3-minute vote. Go ahead and proceed.
Yes, we have Lamar Gillian.
Lamar Gillian, 324 Glen Arm, Balcones Heights, Texas. For those that don't know, Mrs. Slay, Madam Slay, passed away this afternoon after a lengthy stay in the hospital. I just thought it'd be nice to make you aware of that. Thank you.
we like to have just a moment of solace to pray for her family as well, and for her spirit. And our condolences, please convey to the family. Publicly, we announce we feel for her family. Pray for them. Yes.
You think the city could get her a nice arrangement?
Yeah, I think you can staff can arrange for that.
Yeah.
Being it's not on the agenda, we can discuss that at the citizen.
We can definitely
Right, the agenda.
address those issues.
Yeah. Mr. Enriquez
All right.
has. Well, let's move right into the business items. Any other things that were presented to us? Moving right along, item number one, the business budget workshop for fiscal year beginning first, 2025, and ending September 30th, 2025. Mr. Enriquez and Mr. Benson.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council and citizens of Balcones Heights. First, thanks to everyone who can attend, and it's raining outside, so given the weather and everything that's going on, I'm grateful that folks could make it in. So we know that many folks here are new to the process, and with any budget process, it's a deliberative process. This is really just the beginning of our conversations. Today's workshop, and it is a workshop, is about really setting the table, understanding the key issues, pressures, assumptions that shape the financial outlook of our community. Floyd Messick, our finance director, has prepared a comprehensive presentation to walk us through that framework. This is not the time to decide on specific line items or programs. That will come later, but today is critical because it lays the foundation for those decisions. As mayor and council members, you hold the authority and responsibility to adopt the budget. This is a solemn duty. Budgets are moral documents. They reflect the community's values, priorities, commitments to the people that you serve. If you have technical questions, like for example, if you can't read a slide, or an acronym is unfamiliar or something like that, certainly that we can address that. If we're going too quickly or too slowly, whatever the case may be, let us know, and we can definitely tweak the presentation. We would respectfully ask that at this particular workshop, we hold off on questions like, should we be funding this program, or should we be cutting this department, or those kinds of discussions, because we want to allow plenty of time for those deliberative, important discussions. Today is about making certain that everyone has a shared understanding of what we're actually endeavoring to do. And so again, thank you again all for your attendance, your time, your leadership. And without further ado, Floyd, if you could walk us through the budget presentation.
Excuse me, we have a councilman that has a question, just real quick, Mr. Burton.
I thought at our last meeting that we had that Mr. Messick had conveyed to us that this is where we start to put our wish lists together and stuff that. Now I'm hearing the direct opposite.
So I'm not, I don't know if what specifically Mr. Burton you're referencing. There will be plenty of time. This is a
Oh, I understand.
deliberative process.
I understand there's plenty of time, but when we adopted the the budget last council meeting, and he put together the timeline for the budget workshops. He had mentioned that this was a time that we put our wish lists together and start.
I would think, and again, I'm not knowing specifically the incident, but I think what
wasn't an
is it
incident.
would well or the actual phrase or the discussion is budget. This season is the season for that. Think of this as the kickoff, right? We're not even in the first quarter yet. Like, this is just merely the kickoff. The whole period will unfold, right? But if we just, this is really an attempt to set the table, right? What are the assumptions? What is it? What are some of the key things that are coming up? Those kinds of things. So I don't know if that answered your question, though.
It didn't. It totally was the opposite answer of my question.
Well, let me just interject a little bit here, if I may, Councilman Burton. Let's listen to Mr. Messick's presentation. Let's digest it, write some notes down on some things you may have some concerns about. And then in the secondary budget hearing that we probably call a special meeting, have your wish list available at that time. And even though it may have been said to do it this time, if you have it, that puts you much more ahead of the game than all of us. And this might be able to give you more info to process.
It's okay.
Okay.
I withdraw my
Thank you.
question, eating up your time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Burton.
And if I could, I might add, that was probably a little presumptuous on my part too, because traditionally that's what happens on the first budget workshop, right? But his philosophy is, let's go a little bit more slow about it. Let's not rush into it. Let's actually deliberate this stuff. We've got a long time to discuss it, so let's get it right. And so I think that is a good change of philosophy. But for my, that's the way we've always done it. So that's probably why I said what I did at the time, if that helps. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so welcome everybody to Budget Workshop number 1 to kick off the 2026 preliminary budget. So in your packet, you were given the slides that are up on the screen that you can physical copies that you can write on or make notes or questions. You were given a line item budget for which the slides were derived from. Those estimates on the budget were made pretty much in March. And so just a caveat, a lot of these numbers will change. So this is a preliminary budget. We will have firmer numbers for you as we get closer to August. At the end of July, the tax numbers are going to come out, the tax valuations, and we'll know what our ranges are for the tax rates that you can pass. And so the numbers will be a little bit better. Hopefully we'll know the medical estimates at that time too. So these numbers are subject to change, of course, all the way up until the night that we actually approve the budget. You also have a copy of the holiday schedule. We give you all this stuff at the very beginning so that you can have time to digest it and ask questions at a future date. Our holiday schedule has been the same for 3 or 4 years now. There's no change to that, but you are approving the holiday schedule as part of the budget as well. And so we give that to you. Also included is your investment policy, which is required to be reviewed and renewed by council every year. Again, no change. The investment policy does get scrutinized by the PFIA folks. I just did that this year and it came back with a clean bill of health, so there shouldn't be any issues with that. We also include the purchasing policy so that we can say that we gave that to you as well. So all that you'll be approving with the budget, and this will be the last time we talk about it unless you have specific questions. So this is also located in your Dropbox and we have it up on screen. It was emailed to you, but if you need it again, we'll gladly send it to you again tomorrow. Okay. So tonight, can we go back to the overview? Yeah. Let's start with the general overall big picture here of what we're looking at. If I were in your place, these are the things that I would want to know right off the bat. Is our general fund balanced? Well, of course it is. It will be every year. This year it's balanced at 5,759 million. That's both revenues and expenses. I want to know about payroll costs. So in FY26, they're $5.3333 million, which is actually a decrease of nearly 1% over what they are this year. And that marks the second year in a row that we've seen decreases in payroll. That itself is pretty remarkable. Most cities are going to see 3 to 5% increases every year. But because of the red light camera situation, we had to cut some positions the previous year. And so we're seeing the benefits of that travel off into this year. So last year it was a 3.7% decrease or $210,000 savings. And this year we're looking at a $44,000 savings. Your total city debt for FY26 is $515,197. That does include WODA debt of roughly $400,000. And it does include the tax note for the fire truck. FY26 will be the last payment on the fire truck. This year was the last payment on the Vivian tax note. And so that number is $74,000 less than what it was last year because we paid off the Vivian tax note. I'm sorry, as Mr. Enriquez says, if there's any questions about what you're reading here, you don't understand it, just let me know. Let me know if I'm okay. Doing good so far? Okay. Your proposed tax rate on this budget is the same as last year. It remains unchanged at 0.604 of property valuation. Let's see. So we also recognize with this budget cycle that we're kind of switching our focus. From previous years, it was really about stopping the bleeding from the red light camera program. And we were really focused on funneling as much money as we could into the capital fund. But obviously now the focus is being shifted towards EDC. And so that's going to play a big part into what we're doing with our budget. Some of the other problems, because this year's budget is just 1 year, but it's got to be taken into consideration with the whole big picture, right? Not just this budget, but we also know that we're dealing with aging infrastructure in the city. In other words, that revenue pie is getting smaller every year. It's shrinking. We also know that we have upcoming debt for Hillcrest. That's coming up, and that's going to jack up our INS portion of our tax rate in 2027. Of course, we have the WODA. We're still paying that loan in the general fund using general fund cash, and so that presents a problem further on down the road with our cash decreasing. Okay, so at some point we're going to need to take some money out of our investments to shore up the general fund cash situation as we continue to make those payments for WODA. Okay. So tonight, 5 areas. And tonight we have 36 slides. And for those of you like Mr. Burton that have been around for a while, that's quite a big drop off from the 100 or so that we used to present, where we would drop everything on you. And so now our focus is just to give you the stuff that you really know and that you really need to know. And if you want to know something else, we're glad to talk about it. Okay, so we're going to look at the general fund first, look at debt real fast, capital fund, total budget. And then we're going to talk about property taxes because our next workshop, we're going to be asking you guys to vote on something. And so we want to make sure that you understand at least the terminology here a little bit. The numbers that we have for the property tax tonight are the same as last year because we won't know the real numbers for this year until August. Okay. So we'll start with our general fund. Of course, that's your primary fund. It's your largest and most important fund. You have a wide latitude of what you can do in the general fund. I kind of say that the general fund is sort of like the sun and all these other funds revolve around that. And so the general fund is your most important. And like I said, it is balanced at 5,759 million, both revenues and expenses. And now we break out into the general fund revenues real fast. So here we're looking for the Pac-Man. Usually you want to see 1/3 here. You want to see 1/3 of your revenue coming in from the sales tax side. If that number's higher, that's better. you want to see about a third in property taxes. Lower would be better, and the rest of your revenue should be about 1/3. And so we're close to that pattern. That's fairly typical for small cities. So your sales tax this year, we're estimating an $84,000 or 4% increase over what was budgeted this year. Property taxes, even though the valuations are estimated to go down, we're still estimating a $49,000 increase. And we'll tell you why that is later when we start talking about the taxes. But the valuations basically are decreasing, but because your INS portion, because that Vivian tax note was paid off, we're able to take that portion of it and put it into the general fund. Fines and forfeitures, permits, fees, and licenses are about the same as last year. Your other revenues went down $56,000, primarily because in this budget cycle, we have a $79,000 transfer from the red light camera. So we transferred all that money out of the red light camera. So thus the $56,000 decrease. But overall, not bad. It's a $77,000 increase, or about 1%. And of course, our sales taxes, as you can read there, they fluctuate with the economy. Right now, it's economy is kind of going downwards, and so our sales taxes. Fortunately for the city, we have a lot of low-end shopping here. So typically in times of recession, we'll do fairly well. We'll do okay compared to some of the other cities that have a lot of high-end traffic or high volume or high cost merchandise that they sell. Okay. General fund expenses, of course, match what your revenues are. And so here we have an increase of $156,000 over what we did last year, or 2.8. And this is due primarily to the contingency amount. You see that little green slither up there at $200,000? That's your contingency amount. In essence, that's what I have left over when I go to balance the budget. In other words, that's saying I had $200,000 more in revenue than I did in expenses. So the way you make the budget equal out to zero is you open up or you put that money on the contingency line, and that way your budget is balanced. Revenues equal expenses. Without that, then revenues would exceed expenses by $200,000. And there's nothing wrong with presenting it that way either, but we typically present a budget that is balanced to zero. Your operational expenses go up with inflation every year, the same this year. Personnel expenses, $4.28 million, and that eats up about 74% of your expenses in the general fund. Personnel costs in the general fund, though, this year actually go down $88,000. Your operational costs went up $28,000. Your contingency went up $176,000. And we do have a transfer out to the streets fund this year where we didn't last year, and that's for $40,000, and we'll see that when we get to that fund. So nearly 80% of your total payroll is paid in the general fund, and nearly 75% of that number there goes towards public safety. And then we break it out, the general fund payroll by departments, so you can see what's going on within each department. And so some are going up, some are going down. Some of the notable changes, administration went down as we lowered city administrative salary that we had on the books versus last year. It was pretty high last year. Court is lowered because we took one clerk out, Miss Marin, and we moved her into community relations. And so that went down from 3 to 2 personnel. Your fire went down, as I calculated. One of the payments that the fire department gets every other payroll it's called a special amount that they get for if they work the full schedule. That by law they have to get 12 hours. That was overestimated last year, and so readjusting that gives us a little bit of savings there. That and turnover, so fire department decreases 23,000. Your police, there was some turnover, but since they went to the schedule that they're on now, the holiday hours that they work had to be adjusted upwards. And so that's a $19,000 increase over what we had last year. For that, making their total increase 30,000. But again, overall, you add it up, it's an $88,500 savings or a decrease of 2%. There is some assumptions in this. Number one, what we already know, our workers' comp rate went down $24,000 this year, so that helps. Our TMRS rate decreased by 0.1%. That saves us a few thousand. Healthcare increase is still in the budget right now at 10%. There's a potential savings there. Sometimes it goes over that 10%, but most times it doesn't. So we hope to save a little bit of money and bring that forward, hopefully before the budget is passed. But it usually comes out end of August. The COLA assumption that's built into the budget is 2.4. If we had to do one right now, it would be 2.2, but COLA jumps around every month. It started out the year over 3%, and now it's down to 2.2%. We go by the November COLA, and so whatever Social Security puts out, that's what we go by, or at least we have to go by with the police. And so the COLA actually kicks in 1 January, not 1 October. So. So now we branch off into your total personnel costs, $5.3333 million. And again, that's almost a 1% decrease and 3.7% decrease the year before. With your police, fire, and dispatch, that's nearly 77% of that's your public safety, and that's nearly 77% of your total payroll costs. The police department, as you remember from our crime control district meetings, 55% of your payroll for the police goes to the general fund, and 45% will be going to Fund 18, your crime control. For the admin salaries, 80% of that will be in your general fund, and 20% of that will go to the hotel occupancy tax. Manning wise, we managed to decrease the manning by 1 position. That was 1 police corporal for FY26. And personnel cost by fund, we break it out all kinds of ways here. So your general fund, you're looking at 4.28, like you just saw. That's a $88,000 or 2% decrease. And that's 80% of your payroll is captured there in the general fund. 17% of it is captured there in your crime control district. That increase is $37,000. And you can see the rest. So total payroll savings, $44,316. Yeah. Okay, we pause on debt for a little bit here. This goes into 26 and shows what the 26 debt payments are. The difference between this slide this year and last year is the Vivian tax note is no longer up there because we paid that off this year. And so if that were there, then those FY26 payments there at the bottom would be another 74,000. So you'd be close to 600,000. So it's 515,000. It does include the WODA partnership, but that's not covered under your INS debt. Okay, so your property tax rate is not funding that. Your property tax rate is funding the tax note for the fire truck, though, and that's 116,000. And again, next year will be the last payment for that. And so all that is clearing room for the Hillcrest debt that's coming. So I do want to make sure that this slide is understood. Do we make sure everybody understands what's happening with our debt before we go on into the next one? So again, WODA partnership is being paid out of the corporation, cash through the general fund actually, but it's not part of your property taxes, your property tax rate or your INS portion, but the fire truck is, and that goes away next in FY26. Good. Okay. So with the Hillcrest timeline, debt timeline. So what we've been working towards is FY27, right? Because we know we have this certificate of obligation that we're going to have to purchase in order to do Hillcrest. But backing up, so FY25, that $74,000 fell off the books. Next year, the 116,000. So that's saving us 190,000. But for a $4 million tax note repaid over 20 years, we're looking at cranking up our INS portion to $321,000 a year. And so that's going to be nearly a $200,000 increase, not next year, but in FY27. That's coming down the road. Okay, so everybody understands the big picture here? Mr. Ebersol? Yeah. Okay, so yes, sir. So it's staggering. So as debt falls off, we, increase. And so, correct. Yes, those other. So the 74, you keep that, you keep the 116, that's 190, 321. But that's only for 4 million. If it's for a 5 million bond, I don't know how much we're going to need yet. That could be 400,000. So you're looking anywhere from 150 to $200,000 increase on your debt side. And we'll look at it later, but if your debt side's going up, then your general fund side's going down. Okay, so that's a problem for the general fund, potential problem for the general fund in 27. Okay. Capital fund, we're using that to purchase equipment and pay for the city's portion of road reconstruction projects, these CDBG grants that we've been getting. I'm going to recommend holding off on that, especially if we're going into Hillcrest. The fund is dependent on revenue from other sources, primarily from the sweep that we do at the end of the year. So when you have money left over at the end of the year in a budget, it doesn't go away. It goes into the fund balance. So your fund balance increases. So at the end of the year, your fund balance might be 4 or 5 months of fund balance reserve, right? But our regulations or ordinances say that we keep 3 months of it and the rest we sweep out into the capital fund. So that way we always have 3 months in the general fund and the rest can be, moved over to the capital fund for street projects or whatever. Okay. Go ahead with the next one. So with capital purchases, it's all done by sweeps. This does not affect your tax rate. No matter what numbers you see there, it has no effect on your tax rate at all. It's paid for out of its fund balance. For capital equipment, it's a light year. We have $140,000. And we have a recurring need every year for 2 police vehicles. That's $120,000. Talking with Mr. Timmons, though, he's pretty sure that for 26, we probably only need 1. So we'll probably knock that down to 60,000 for the next slideshow. We have $20,000 for fire station renovations. That's been an ongoing project for the past 4 or 5 years. It's an old fire station, of course. It needs a lot of love. And so we're baby stepping that, giving them a little bit every year to help bring that back up. But the biggest chunk of your capital fund next year will be for street projects, $873,000. 673,000 is the city's portion for Crestview Phase 2. For now, we just have $200,000 of engineering cost for Hillcrest. That may be more or less. We'll see. And that also that Crestview project that may not all be paid out in 26. That may bleed into 27. But with your capital fund, it can cross multiple fiscal years, and that's not a problem. Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Burton.
So we just paid off Vivian. Is there a balance on Pleasant? Was there, or did we?
No, we didn't do a tax note for that, so that's been paid. Yes, sir. Okay, special revenue funds. So we have 16 special revenue funds altogether. We're only going to show you slides for 5 of them tonight, what we think are the most important ones. These funds are restricted or fenced. You've been through the crime control briefings already. That's for crime control. I can't pave a street out of that. Your child safety fund, we can't do sewer work out of that. So these are fenced for specific things. Yeah, okay, let's go on with that one. Your streets fund, we start there because that's the lowest number. So street funds is really an extension of the general fund, but it's its own fund. And it's used to, just a basic roadway maintenance, no major road constructions or anything, potholes, maybe a small mill and overlay somewhere. But all that cost money. So in the past, last couple of years, when the focus was on the capital fund, we were rating this fund, taking money out of that and moving it over to capital. So all that stops now. This year, we had planned to take $100,000 out of this fund and move it into the capital fund. But we're going to put the brakes on that because we're aware of some road work that needs to get done. And so in FY26, instead of transferring money out, we're actually transferring 40,000 in from the general fund to try to get that fund balance back up to a reasonable number because, even a mill and overlay can be expensive. So that's what's going on with that one. Yes, ma'am.
What are the 16 special funds under special revenue?
Yeah, so for me to try to name them all, I could, but you got federal forfeiture, seized cash, child safety fund, PEG fund, debt service fund, economic incentive fund.
Can you write them in here the next time we get there?
I could, and ma'am, it's also in your budget. It's all broken out.
Okay.
And so everything after the capital fund, that's all
Everything's-
the revenue until you get to the sewer stuff. But yeah, we can put them on the next slide for sure. Just for you. Okay. Of course, our largest special revenue fund is the Balcones Heights Crime Control and Prevention District Fund 18. And that budget that we passed, this is pretty much it. Of course, it's going to be subject to change as our sales tax estimates come in and we lock down the personnel costs. But right now it is a balanced fund and there's about a 3-month fund balance there. It's not required, but anytime we have payroll, I like to keep about 3 months in case it all goes south on us, and we'll have a little bit of leeway there. So again, 45% of your police costs are going to this fund. The other 55% are in your general fund. The fund is the revenue for the fund comes from sales taxes, of course. So for every dollar that's spent, 1% of it is going to go to the general fund and a 0.5% of it is going to go to the crime control district. Your hotel occupancy tax, and I think this is your second largest special revenue fund. And this is pretty much what we, obviously the Jazz Festival comes out of every year. By government code, we can only spend 15% of it towards the arts. So what we're doing this year is we're actually putting some of the Jazz Fest cost into the general fund. So that way we can hopefully make it a bigger and better event, or maybe even bring it back to our 2 or 3 days because it's just one day recently. In here, 20% of your administrative costs are going to go to this fund, and the other 80% for administrative goes to the general fund. A little note up there: your occupancy rate is 14.75 in the city, compared to 16.75 in San Antonio, and you can see how it's distributed there. But a really good, healthy fund balance, which may come in handy down the road. But again, this budget, of course, is balanced. Economic, yes, sir, Mr. Burton.
Guilty. In past years, we've had, more hotels. With the only one hotel, shouldn't that be going down?
Yes, sir. Revenue is trending downwards in the hotel fund. Yes, sir. Because of that. But I mean, the rates are actually going up too, right? Because that one hotel is pretty good. It was our biggest hotel, and rates go up, their rates go up. So our tax collections go up with it. So,
Because I would like to see ideas on return on our investment of the Jazz Festival, some type of return. Because as those funds dwindle, it's going to be harder and harder to do a jazz festival. Just putting it out there.
Noted. Okay, your economic incentive fund. This fund was created before the EDC with the hopes of generating some revenue to help out local businesses um, and perhaps help in swinging a bigger deal, but we never really had a sufficient fund balance for that. As such, we were rating the fund balance from this one, of course, to move money into the capital fund as well. We put the brakes on that this year and for next year as well, hoping to maintain some semblance of a fund balance there for local businesses. Again, as the focus moves from the capital to the to EDC. Otherwise, yeah, it's nothing going on in that fund for next year, just reserving the fund balance. And of course, the economic development. Of course, we're not projecting any revenues, of course, for next year. If some come in, that's great. Expenses, the minimum amount of expenses that you would have is $400,000 because that's your 4 quarterly loan payments. We also budget for some other things like legal services, professional services, travel, things that will probably not get spent. But if the attorney decides to start charging us again, then we have something budgeted for it. So you have a rather large fund balance. As you can see, it all started at 5 million because that was their portion of it at the time. And it's going to go down, at least $400,000 every year until that's all spent. But a fund balance doesn't mean there's cash in the account. And so that's why your quarterly payments are actually being funded with general fund cash. And then we're recording a loan from the EDC. And so that's an asset. As that number gets bigger, hopefully in the future, we'll be able to recoup any money and return it to the general fund. But that is affecting cash. Okay. So those are the 5 that we looked at. We turn our attention now to your proprietary funds, and that's simply the sewer and your stormwater funds. Okay. And it basically saws bills for the city's portion of it, and they pay us, and that's how we collect our revenue. It's based on our fee schedule, and what the city set years ago really is what we're collecting. Pretty good collections in the sewer. We could probably do a little bit better on the stormwater side. I'll probably need to look at those a little bit better in the next year or two. But we start, yes, sir.
Interrupting mid-sentence.
No, go ahead.
I'm running a what if here. What if there was a failure in one of the ditches? Would that come out of the sewer fund, or would that come out of our general fund or maintenance operations, or?
Well, hopefully, if it's affordable, it would come out of the stormwater fund, because that's what ditches are. It's to channel stormwater or wastewater or rainwater down the way. And so, if there was enough money in that, then that would be my first choice.
Is there a way where we get help from SAW or FEMA or whatever, if there was a catastrophic failure? We're operating right now as if everything's peachy keen. We're not thinking the worst, but just a what if.
Yeah. I do not know the answer to that. I imagine we would reach out for any kind of help we could get, of course, but other than that, I don't know.
Okay.
On the proprietary funds, how come you don't have the amounts? It says the fund is balanced, revenues equal expenses. Well, what are the revenues and what are the expenses?
Glad you asked. They're on the next slide. We have 2 funds, and so all combined, they are balanced. So the proprietary funds altogether are balanced. And so we start with the sewer fund, Fund 56. And this is another one of those funds that we were rating quite frequently because it makes pretty good revenue every year. And so we were rating that for our capital fund as well. We put a halt to that this year and next year going forward because we want to build up our fund balance. So as you can see, what we have here for 26 is we actually have surplus spending, right? We actually have more revenues than expenses. We want to get that fund balance well over $1 million. We're having to replace a lot of sewer pipes this year. The stuff's 50 years old. It's only going to get worse. And $1 million really doesn't tell it anything, but it's a good start. And so what we're trying to do now is to pump this fund up as best as we can. And there's a lot of potential in that fund to do so. So hopefully next year, at the end of when all is said and done, we'll have a $1 million fund balance there. That's the goal anyway. Okay, and then our last proprietary fund is our stormwater. Again, the same thing. We were hitting it pretty hard for capital transfers, putting a halt to that, and just putting aside any revenue that we can get. Looking at $250,000 by the end of next year. And again, the bigger we can grow that, the better cushion we have for something like Mr. Burton said, if we had a catastrophic failure somewhere. Okay, almost done. So your total budget includes revenues and expenses from all the city funds, general fund, capital fund, your 16 special revenue funds, and your 2 proprietary funds. Of course, the general fund is balanced. Overall, though, the budget reflects a deficit of $948,000. And that's due primarily to capital spending, which varies every year. There's $662,000 deficit there this year. Next year, it might be $1 million surplus. But this year, or in 26, it's $662,000 that we're going to spend more of in the capital fund than we have revenue coming in. So that's part of it. And of course, our EDC, every year, that's going to be $400,000 of deficit until we start getting partnership dividends in again. And so there is some surpluses in some of the special revenue funds and our proprietary funds to the tune of $152,000. That offsets some of the deficits. But overall, if you look at the total budget, you're going to see revenues over expenses of minus $948,000. Okay. So taking a look at your total budget revenues. This is a decrease from last year of $232,000 or 3%. And that's due primarily to the decrease in capital fund revenue of $324,000, a decrease in debt service fund because that INS portion is now going to the general fund. So that's a deficit of $78,000. Increasing in the general fund, that's an increase of 77. That brings the number up. Increases in special revenues, 766 or 760,000. That brings that number up. And an increase in proprietary fund revenues of 15,000. So that leads to a grand total of a deficit or a decrease of 232,000 or 3% over what was budgeted last year. And again, the biggest culprit there is because of your capital fund. Service charges. So the little yellow graph there, or the little yellow portion of the pie, that's service charges. That's from your proprietary funds. A lot of that other stuff is a function of the general fund, obviously the taxes as well. Total budget expenses. Again, we said there was a deficit. So this number is bigger than the number you just saw. So this is $9,667 million. It's actually a decrease of 73,000 or 1% over what was budgeted last year. The biggest changes are to debt repayments, capital outlay, transfers out, and personnel. So the big reasons why you see the change here is due primarily to an increase in general fund expenses of 157,000, increase in capital fund expenditures of 348,000, a decrease in debt service because we're not paying the Vivian anymore. That's 74,000. A decrease in special revenue funds because we stopped all those transfers out, saving 373,000. And a decrease in proprietary funds, 131,000, also due because of the fact that we're not transferring money out again. Okay, let's move on into our proposed tax rate. So we're just going to talk about the lingo here a little bit. All the slides, again, that you're about to see are with last year's numbers, but they help get the point across and get you used to the definitions that you're going to be seeing coming up in the future workshops. So these are last year numbers. But the first statement there is going to be true anyway, unless you all change it. Over the course of the summer, our proposed tax rate that we're proposing right now is unchanged at 0.604. There'll be some statement in there that says how much more property taxes that's going to raise. We don't know that number yet. The biggest thing here is that your property tax rate is made up of two components: the maintenance and operations. It's made up of two components. The maintenance and operations portion is called M&O, obviously, maintenance and operations, and all that goes into your general fund. The other portion is the interest and sinking portion, INS, and that's what's going to go to your debt service fund to pay back city-backed debt, which of course does not include WODA, but just the tax notes or any general obligation bond that we do for Hillcrest. So these two are connected. They're sort of like a seesaw, okay? If one portion gets bigger, then the other one is going to go smaller, okay? Assuming you want to keep the same tax rate. Okay, so if our INS portion goes up in 27, then guess what happens to the M&O? The money going into the general fund is going to go down if you want to keep the same tax rate. Otherwise, you have to raise your M&O portion of the tax rate, okay, to keep the same amount. Yeah, and so here's some definitions that you're going to be seeing more of as we get into it. And so the first one that you need to be aware of is a taxable value. This is going to be calculated by myself and the county, and then we compare notes, usually about the same numbers, but we go by what the county gives us. Obviously, they're the authority. And so that's the appraised value, less exemptions. And that's what we use. That's the big number that we use to calculate your property tax rate. Last year, that number was 360 million. I'm estimating this year it's going to go down to 355 million. So obviously, if the tax value goes down and the tax rate remains the same, then the revenue coming in will be less. Okay. There's your definitions again for INS and M&O. Those are the two components that make up your tax rate. Your proposed rate is the rate needed to pay both of those. Our proposed rate for FY26, again, is the same as last year, 0.604 at this point. You'll see no new revenue rate, and that's the rate, that's a terminology that the state adopted. It's the rate that gives you about the same revenue as last year. You have a voter approval rate. We think of that as the ceiling. That's the highest we can go without initiating a voter approval. Okay. And the current rate is simply the council approved rate. And then your average home is also given every year so that you can do an apples to apples comparison to see, you know, what you paid last year versus what you might pay this year. So you'll see all that and probably the next budget cycle for sure. Just taking a look at historic values. Generally, they go up. You see COVID year there, 2021, everything went down and then it rebounded nicely in 22. A pretty good increase in 23, and then it starts leveling off. 360 million last year, and again, projecting even smaller numbers. I hope I'm wrong, but projecting 355 million this year. And we'll know the last week of July what that number is. Yeah. Historically, what our city has done is maintain the same tax rate as long as we can. That allows the property value increases to generate the revenue for us without going back to the residents and saying, hey, we raised your tax rate, right? Your tax bill went up because your valuations went up. And so number of years, 0.583, the last 2 years, 0.604, and hopefully that's what we'll have for next year as well. But you can see the INS portion there and the M&O portion. You can see there the INS, the light blue, it's getting bigger, and the M&O is getting smaller. Again, that's the same principle. One goes up, the other goes down.
Messick, I do.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
So why do you project a lower total revenue this year?
Yeah, good question. And so the property evaluations actually start coming out in April. And historically, what we did in another city and other cities that I know about and what we do in this city, we take that initial evaluation and we drop it 10%. And at the end, and it comes out like every couple of weeks towards the end. Sometimes it might come out once a month. So you'll get April, May, June, a couple in June, a lot in July, and then you get the final one. But historically, it's been about a 10% decrease. And what that is your protests, right? They do a good job of evaluating the property, but everybody protests, right? And so they start chopping it down because of that. But historically, I know I can chop off 10% and it's going to be around that number, plus or minus. That's a good question, though. Okay, how we got our number last year, of course, it starts with your debt. How much debt payments are you going to have? Well, we're going to have less this year. And so that means we're going to have more going into the general fund. And that's part of what's creating that $200,000 surplus. But you take that big number of 360 million, or maybe 355 million for next year, and you divide that by your total need, and that gives you your tax rate, your overall tax rate of 0.604. Of course, we're breaking out by M&O and INS portion as well. So again, I get be thinking about 27 with all of this. And so, we've got a big payback of debt coming, 300,000, maybe 400,000. That's really going to jack up that INS number that you see there. And so accordingly, the M&O side would have to come down. You can say, let's raise the tax rate on the M&O side. That is an option, but then you have to worry about the voter approval rate. And I think that's on the next slide. Yeah. So here's where your voter approval rate comes in. Again, we're using last year's numbers. We picked a rate of 0.604 last year, and you can see that fell well under the voter approval rate. Think of voter approval rate as your ceiling. You don't want to go over that because that generates a vote and nobody's going to vote for a tax increase, right? And so your no new revenue, you kind of look at that as the floor. The state would like for you to aim for the floor every year, but that's not realistic with smaller cities. And so our proposed rate was about in the middle there last year, and so that's good. But if you add another 6 cents of that to that, because of the debt that we have coming up, you can see we would probably be well over the voter approval rate. Now, these numbers change every year based on the valuations, so you can't say that that's going to be the same for next year. It'll be a different number. All those numbers will be different, but just keep it in mind for 27. Taxing entities. So what makes up your tax bill? If you've ever wondered, well, this is what makes it up. The biggest chunk of your tax bill is going to the school districts. Now, this slide's a couple of years old, so these percentages might not be, but they're close enough. And so roughly 50% of your tax bill is going to your school districts. The city is about 20%, and all those other entities make up the rest of it. So we always say when we present the tax bill, it is mathematically possible that the city could say, we're going to cut our tax rate to zero. We're not going to charge anything. We're going to do that for our residents. But all those other entities could raise it and they would still see a tax rate increase on their bill. It's like, what happened? You took away the tax rate, but my bill still went up. Well, it's because most of those other entities, they really control what's going on with your tax rate. The city has some leverage, about 20% in it, but just good to know information. And then who's paying the most of the taxes in your city? Your commercials, by far, roughly 65% is being paid by them. Your multifamily units are paying the other 25%. Your residents are paying about 10% of the tax bill. And well, we can't do anything as far as breaks for the commercial or the multifamily side, but we do offer quite a bit of exemptions there for your residents. In that slide last year, it was $45 million in tax relief. That's money that didn't go to the city that the residents saved. And so that number will go up, of course, next year. This was from last year as well. I don't think it's going to change much this year. We were usually neck and neck with Kirby for third place there. We're in second place now, heading towards the top. Somerset, we still have a way to go to catch them, but it's been creeping up over the years. And this is a reflection of basically the services that you provide. As a small city, it's kind of unusual that a lot of small cities offer the full fire department and dispatch and those kind of services. And so that's what really is making your tax rate higher, plus the shrinking infrastructure or the aging infrastructure, right? As the pie gets smaller, the tax rate's got to go up if you want to maintain those same services. Okay, again, there's the same thing we said at the beginning of this. Again, just so for this year's budget, right, it's good. I kind of look at it as the calm before the storm. You've got $200,000 extra. What can you do with that? Well, that's for us to decide over the course of the summer. But looking forward down the road, we know that we have that aging infrastructure, those declining evaluations that are going to continue to shrink our tax base. We know that we have the upcoming Hillcrest, maybe $400,000 a year payments that are coming up. That's going to affect the INS side. And of course, we're dealing with the WODA thing as best as we can, but that's a cash crunch on the general fund side that has to be addressed at some point as well. That's pretty much the summary. What you're going to see next. One more slide there. Maybe there we go. Our next steps. So our next budget workshop number 2 is scheduled for August the 4th. So what's going to happen before that is in the last week of July, we're going to know what the valuations are. We're going to calculate that voter approval rate, that no new revenue rate, and what the city's rate is, and all that good stuff. And we'll have that ready for you. Now at the next meeting, so a heads up, you have to take a vote at the next meeting. Okay. And it's a vote to confirm the tax rate. It's sort of like what we did in crime control, where you're voting on a number that's fictitious, really, that could change. But you're saying at that point that, yes, we see the numbers. Right now, we think we want to keep our tax rate at 0.604. And so we're going to vote to confirm that number, okay? Or whatever number you want. Honestly, it doesn't matter, but we have to do it. And so that's what's going to happen on your next budget workshop. Okay, so just be aware of that. And with that, 36 slides, I'm done. We still have the line item budget if you have questions on that. All the other handouts.
Carrying this very comprehensive budget to council in the city, and taking the time numbers. I also want to thank you as well for taking action on some of the concerns I had beginning of my administration, in which the practice of trading certain accounts, moving it over to general operating. And I had recognized that as potential savings for us. So I want to really thank you for listening to us and taking the initiative to make that behavioral change. So I wanted to thank you very much for that, for presenting the budget, preparing the slides, doing everything that you did that gave us a very comprehensive analysis of where we're at, where we're looking to be at, and what we need to possibly do individually in our own capacity to determine where the tweakings of the budget need to be done. And reiterating what I just said right now, I also would like to thank you very much for taking task to hearing some of the concerns in the beginning of my administration that I had regarding those funds that were being rated, moved over into the capital fund, and that practice has now stopped, and we're initiating a different and implementing a different policy that see how that's going to work for us. Just so the council knows, we operate basically on a zero-based budget. And I know that I've heard this in the beginning of the campaign and during the times we've had conversations about what happens to the money that we save Like, for example, on the EDC position that has not been filled, that's $100-some thousand that we had. The lieutenant position that doesn't get filled. Because we operate on a zero-based budget, that money gets moved over into the general fund. And it gets used for sewer, it gets used for streets. In other words, it really helps the budget overall and helps Mr. Messick financially in the auditing process where we have this extra money. But eventually, we're going to need to utilize it to implement whatever the council wishes later in terms of filling those positions, leaving them open. But just remember, whatever savings we have, it's not going to be placed in a savings account because we operate on a zero budget account. It moves directly over to the general operating fund. From there, it gets dispersed to different funds, again, like the sewer, the street, wherever it's needed at that time. And it gives them more flexibility to address some of the shortcomings in the budget. And so that's what happens with the salary savings, just in case anybody was curious, because we used to think, most of us thought, well, why don't we put that money in a savings account? Well, it needs to go, always goes back because of the local government code into that general
Yeah,
operating.
you can think of your fund balance as that savings account.
Right.
And then once it's maxed out, then it just goes into the capital fund and it can go back and forth.
Right.
You can take it out of the capital fund if needed. So,
And what I'd like to do is, because I've analyzed this very carefully on the status of our financial stability or instability at one time, we have basically a principle like this. The city is operating on what you call like a two-legged stool. It only has two legs that it's standing on, and that is ad valorem tax and sales tax. So what I am challenging the council to do between now and the budget cycle is put on your thinking hats of how we can create additional revenue sources so that we have that third leg to stand in case one of those two legs happen to break. And that means like decrease in ad valorem or decrease, a drastic reduction in sales tax. Say a COVID hits us again or something. We need to have that third leg that the city can stand on safely still, and a safety third leg. And what that means is we start looking aggressively at grants. Like I mentioned at the beginning of my administration, grants is going to be a key component to helping us do that. And then we look at places where we can reduce expenditures and increase revenues. And so you guys just put on your thinking caps later and come up with some ideas. I really look forward, and I'm sure the citizens will too, to see if we can develop that third safety. Let's just call it a safety net, the third leg. And so I'm very pleased. Thank you very much, Mr. Messick. Any other council members have any comments for Mr. Messick? Because do you have any comments you'd like to add, sir?
No, Mayor, I just, as I said, I apologize if I, misinterpreted the questions about with respect to wish lists and
Right.
whatnot. We really want to start now, right? If you want to think about it, this is and this is really up to the council, right? Like special meetings, discussions around specific topics. Mr. Messick has listed August 4th as our second budget workshop, but there's really nothing to prevent the council from meeting again to get into these more nuanced discussions around specific amounts, things you have in your packet now, either based on the fund category or the actual line item itself. Now we can, begin those discussions in earnest because we have the information in front of us. And so I just welcome you. It's really, the ball is in your court, right? At this point, if you would like to, convene a special meeting specifically for the purposes of beginning to see, once you've had we didn't want to just throw this all out and to just say, well, okay, what do you think? But now the deliberative process begins in earnest because you have the information in front of you. So digest it. If you want to let us know, if you want to call a special meeting around this, which I'm pretty sure you will, that's the moment and the time that we can begin that. If you want to meet with Mr. Messick or myself as well around a specific category of spending or revenue for that matter, that's perfectly okay as well. We are at your disposal. So think of us as sort of your research arm. And if you say, well, I have a question about Fund X, why is it so high or why is it so low? Or what do other communities do around this? Services, whatever. We can begin those discussions. They don't have to this isn't the one and only opportunity to do that. Digest it, look it over, see what resonates with you, and then let us begin that process. We're here at your to work for you and for the citizens of the community. So
Mr. Hernandez had something to say, I think.
Mr. Enriquez, you said earlier that this is the beginning of the, workshop for the budget and that we have plenty of time. So I have a couple questions. One, well, when is the end of it? How much time do we have?
So if you really want to think about the end, the budget begins October 1st.
October, okay. And then when can we go ahead and implement that, wish list, if we will? Why wouldn't we just add it to the next meeting?
As far as what we'd like, I think what would make the most sense is the next meeting, as in budget workshop number 2.
Yes.
Yeah, you could. Depending on I guess part of this is how long's the wish list, right? If the wish list is like this, then that's going to probably take some time to sit through and go through each. I mean, if you want to begin that process by sending things my way, I'd be happy to start looking at that and sort of figuring out how best to unpack all of that, right? If the list is like that, yeah, in all likelihood, yeah, we could probably combine that as part of the August 2nd meeting. But at this point, I don't have an indication as how many wishes are on if it looks like my kid's Christmas list, that probably requires some time.
Gotcha.
But if not, let's begin that dialogue. Feel free to email me, let me know. I'll sit down. I'll be happy to sit down with you and begin that process.
Or we could all get together.
Gotcha.
And
And the other thing, the way this process,
there, and
yeah,
everybody give up their little wish list and see how many have the same wishes,
Right.
and so we can bring it down a little bit. I mean, what if we wish the same thing and he wishes the same thing and it's repetitious, so we just get the best of all of it.
and the other thing is the reason I concur with this process, different from the last process, it gives you enough time to do your homework and realistically look at some of your wish list items and say, is it affordable? And where is it affordable? How much money and where can we get the money from to do these things? Which means that, like, for example, let's just take LED lighting for the whole city. You want to take that project on to create efficient lighting in the city to go from regular bulb to LED. Well, start exploring right now by contacting CPS or whoever, a company that does business in LED lighting, to get a rough estimate of what that would cost you. The first thing you would do is call city administrator, Mr. Messick, how many light poles do we have in Balcones Heights? You got 100 light poles? they're costing you 10,000 each poll. I'm just giving an example, then you know what your number is. Now you can go to council with a somewhat realistic number to propose your idea to your colleagues here on the council. And then before that, you will meet with Mr. Messick and Mr. Enriquez, whoever the administrator would be at that time. And you say, is this feasible? And if it's feasible, you execute. If it isn't, then you move on your next wish list item. Know that right now, that item is not feasible. But you can work on the idea and present it so that the ball gets rolling on something. But you work with your realistic goals. And that's why I like the fact that we were able to get a comprehensive analysis and explanation from Mr. Messick as to where we currently stand, where our money is, what are projected possible deficits, and what are projected revenue sources. What is going to be, where are we going to stand in 2025 moving into 26 as well? And this gives you an idea, but you got to do your homework yourself. And if you can't, we'll reach out to Mr. Enriquez.
Yeah, and don't feel,
and I'll
yeah.
help.
And if, again, Mayor, we can help, I can help with the homework. Like, if you, what I'd like to do, if that's all right, is basically send out an email and then just begin to solicit ideas or
Perfect.
wish lists, what have you. I'll compile all that and then solicit everything that's on there, put it into different categories. Again, we can't deliberate, other than in open meetings like this.
Right.
But as far as collecting the information, compiling it, that way we can have sort of just a centralized area.
Perfect. That gives you an outline and a template of where everybody's going, and then everyone can get a realistic picture of whether it's feasible or not, based on our money that we have. Is everyone okay with that, council? Okay, good. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn if we don't have anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second to that motion? Okay, all in favor? Just say aye.
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 Any nays? Aye. Okay, all ayes. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ayes and 1 absent from David. The time is going to be 7:17 p.m. We have now adjourned. Thank you again, Mr. Messick.